Welcome to Above Par. I'm your host, Kathy Hartwood. I show you how to take more of your talent to the golf course without practicing harder, taking more lessons, or buying new equipment. I show you how to end the frustration of underperforming so you can start playing to your potential. This is where you are going to learn how to think above par so you can play below par. Let's get to it. Hello, my golf friend. Welcome back to Think Above Par. I hope you're amazing. This episode is post-Masters, and I want to talk about some of the experiences because I think the Masters is such a great ground to hear a lot about what the players are thinking mentally. They share a lot in their interviews, and if you're listening to this podcast, hopefully you start listening to some of the things that they say through the lens of mental golf and how it can help you and support you to realize that you have a human brain just like they do. And you're experiencing the same things. They are working with and working against and guiding their brain on the golf course. And their Masters is the Masters that we watch on TV, but you might have your own kind of Masters relative to things that you play in at your club, meaning it's enough of an event and it's important enough to you that it is going to rattle your cage, your hamster cage, your brain, and shake up a lot of thoughts and emotions that you're dealing with the same things that someone like Rory or the players in the Masters are dealing with. It's no different. Anxiety is anxiety is anxiety. Your fear and their pressure and your pressure, it feels the same inside the container of our bodies. The situation might be different. One might be a showcase of the Masters on a big, huge platform, and yours might be at your local club. It doesn't matter. I just want you to see yourself in some of the things that you might have heard in the interviews, post-round interviews during the Masters from all kinds of different players. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about specifically back to Rory, because he won back-to-back, and it was a really exciting Masters to watch, that is such a valuable life lesson that I want to share. And he talked about heartbreak. And if you didn't hear it, it was in one of his post-round interviews. And I want to read it to you, talking about heartbreak. He said, at a certain point, someone in life might not want to fall in love because they don't want to get their heart broken. I think instinctually as human beings, we hold back because there is a fear of being hurt. And he says he thinks he was doing that on the golf course a little bit for a few years. And once he's gone through those heartbreaks, as he calls them, or disappointments, he would rephrase them as, you get to a place where you remember how it feels and you wake up the next day and you're like, yeah, life goes on. That's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. You dust yourself off and you go again. He said, I think that's why I've become a little bit more comfortable laying everything out there and, being somewhat vulnerable at times. This was Rory. There's a few things that I want you to take away from that. But one is that golf is emotional. Golf exposes and reveals so many different emotions for us. And I talk about you could have 8 emotions on one hole, but also relative to our results, losing or winning or feeling disappointed in the way that we finished a round. It is part of the experience of life, but it's also a microcosm when you're on the golf course. Right? We're in this container for 4 hours plus where we can't escape. Life, you can get away and you can just kind of sit in things for a while, or you can go shop, or you can get distracted online, or you can go gamble or go to the bar or whatever. You can do something to distract yourself. You've got to deal with it on the golf course. You've got to experience it if you're going to get yourself back to a place where you can perform to your full potential. So he revealed so much in that interview about how emotional golf is. It is not a problem. Experiencing an emotion is not a problem. He said it's not a problem being disappointed, heartbroken. You wake up the next day and you're like, but I did not die. I survived it. And we have a tendency to fear emotions so much that we end up playing very small. Right? If we can understand that processing an emotion is 60 to 90 seconds, other than for grief, and I include shame in that just because it's one that's stuck around for me for a while, but most of our fears are of emotions, that we think we're not going to survive the emotion. It's just a vibration, and it just lasts 60 to 90 seconds. How you treat yourself and the language and the berating that you might give yourself is the painful part. If you can stand back and just say that I'm disappointed and announce the emotion, whether internally or externally, this is what I'm feeling at this moment, you become the observer of it instead of getting wrapped up in it. If you can direct and pivot your language after that and have your own back, it might not be the most pleasant experience, but if you know that it's temporary and you know you're going to wake up the next day and say, I'm going to move on, then you get to live a very full life experience, right? So our emotions on a spectrum, we get them all as humans. We get from joy on one end or ecstasy or whatever you would call the most positive of emotions you could possibly have, all the way over to grief. We get all of them and all the ones in between. There's thousands of emotions that you could possibly experience, but we're just so not aware of them because we're not willing to step into them. But you do not get to have a full human experience if you're not willing to go down towards those emotions of heartbreak and disappointment. If you're not willing to step into those emotions and experience them and know that you're going to be okay on the other side, then you don't get the polar opposite of that emotion, which is joy and ecstasy in the victory of winning a tournament, if you're not willing to experience heartbreak. And his point in this, in his quote, was that he was restricting himself, limiting himself from playing full and putting it all out there because he was trying not to have the heartbreaks on the golf course, however that showed up for him. And the minute he was willing to be vulnerable, which is another emotion a lot of people are not willing to experience, he was willing to be vulnerable and risk being very disappointed and heartbroken, was he able to play to his full potential so that he could experience the contrast emotion of super proud, ecstatic, whatever that vocabulary word would be, that would be the opposite of that. He doesn't get that one. He doesn't get to experience it fully unless he knows what heartbreak feels like, unless you know what disappointment feels like. So often, like I was talking about a second ago, people play and live inside a very small box around neutral. They only let themselves get a little bit sad. And we can use a lot of things in life to keep us from getting too sad or too upset or too disappointed, right? We can buffer with so many things in our world and in society, whether it's gambling or food or drinking or shopping or video games or our phones or watching TV. These are ways that we get to distract ourselves from emotions that we don't find to be very pleasant so that we avoid getting ourselves too far down into that negative end of the spectrum. But the cost to you is that you then only are allowed to be the opposite of that in the positive end of the spectrum. You don't get to be a little bit sad and buffering your life through and then also get to have joy and ecstasy because you don't understand what that is if you don't have the contrast, right? We don't know what happy is unless we know what sad is. If we're constantly just buffering our way through that, eventually happy becomes like neutral or just really insignificant, right? So where are you limiting yourselves as far as your willingness to go into that negative end of the spectrum of emotions? Where are you holding yourself back and not willing to experience them all, aka playing small, right? Because his example of being willing to be heartbroken, he talked about relationships, and that's, I think, an amazing point. If you're not willing to go into a relationship because you don't want to be heartbroken, then you don't get to experience love fully, right? With total vulnerability. If you're not willing to experience losing a pet because we have to put a pet down or they have a shorter lifespan than us, then you're not willing also to experience the love and the companionship of an animal like a dog or a cat that is meaningful. We've got to be willing to experience that loss and that heartbreak so that we get to experience also the polar opposite of it. And so that was a life lesson in there, but also a golf lesson on how he's been holding himself back out on the golf course, and that his willingness to step into that has allowed him to show up at a different level. And so one of the things that I want for you to ask of yourself is, where are you holding back and playing small? And what emotions are you not willing to experience? Or even looking at, where do you buffer your emotions in life? And knowing that it really is just 60 to 90 seconds to process it. And like Rory said, you'll wake up the next day and you'll be like going, okay, I did that. And that's about being resilient, right? The more that we do something, the more we're willing to experience those emotions and fail and screw up, which is going to happen in the game of golf. We become resilient to it. We realize that we're willing to put ourselves out there and fail and try things, whether it's playing in a tournament that you're afraid to sign up for, or putting yourself out there fully, or showing up differently in a relationship, and know that you're going to be okay because you want the experience of that positive end of the spectrum. So just something for you to think about, a little life lesson inside of the golf lesson that Rory shared with us at the end of the Masters. All right, my friends, I hope you have a beautiful week. I'll talk to you next Wednesday. Bye. If you're ready to stop playing small and start showing up like the golfer you know you can be, come work with me inside Unleash Your Golf. Go to paperbell.me/golf. You can book a discovery call or jump straight into the program. Let's get to work.